Max, I've been thinking about something that's been bothering me. You know how everyone's always saying universities should be marketplaces of ideas?
I'm familiar with the phrase. What's troubling you about it?
Well, I was reading about those campus protests last spring, the encampments, the whole thing, and I keep seeing people argue both sides. Students have a right to protest versus the university needs to maintain order. But nobody seems to be asking what I think is the more important question.
Which is,
what's a university actually for? Like, what's its job?
that's not the question I expected, but it's exactly the right one. What do you think the answer is?
See, that's where I get stuck. Is it just to transfer information? Because if that's all it is, then yeah, let people protest. They can do whatever they want as long as nobody gets hurt. But if it's supposed to be doing something more...
More like what?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. You're supposed to be the wise one here.
I'm not sure wisdom is my strong suit, but I can tell you what older generations believed about education in a republic. They thought it had a specific purpose, forming citizens capable of self-government.
Forming them how?
By cultivating certain habits of character. The ability to engage disagreement without it devolving into faction. The capacity to distinguish between legitimate dissent and mob rule. The courage to stand by principles even when it's unpopular.
So, it's not just teaching facts, but teaching people how to be.
Exactly. Aristotle argued that education must produce citizens capable of ruling and being ruled. That's not a skill you acquire just by reading textbooks.
Okay, but here's what I don't get. If that's the goal, then what were universities doing last spring when they just let things spiral? I mean, some of these schools admitted they had policies against encampments, but chose not to enforce them. How does that teach anything except rules don't matter?
It doesn't. That's precisely the problem. So they
failed. Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
Worse than that, they abdicated.
There's a difference?
Failure implies you tried and came up short. Abdication means you abandoned the responsibility entirely. When administrators at UC campuses said, yes, we have policies, but we're choosing not to enforce them. They weren't failing at education, they were refusing to engage in it.
But maybe they were trying to avoid making things worse? Like, if you crack down too hard, doesn't that just escalate the conflict?
That's the excuse, yes. But look at what the data actually showed. The universities that resolved protests peacefully weren't the ones that avoided conflict. They were the ones that engaged early and substantively while maintaining clear boundaries.
Wait, really?
Brown University is the clearest example. Direct engagement with protesters, ensuring institutional processes gave them a legitimate avenue for their concerns.
No tolerance for blocking access or excluding other students.
Peaceful resolution in days, not weeks. It's about understanding and connection, not just quick fixes.
And the ones that avoided engagement?
Weeks of disruption. Escalating tensions. So eventually, either police intervention or complete institutional surrender. The worst outcomes came from schools that neither enforced rules nor engaged meaningfully. They just hoped it would go away.
So avoiding conflict didn't preserve peace.
Exactly. It never does. Boundaries left unenforced are invitations to transgression. And transgression, unpunished, invites escalation.
Okay, but I can hear the counter-argument already. Like, civil rights protesters broke rules too. Should universities have shut them down?
That's the strongest objection, and it deserves a serious answer. But notice what you're really asking. Are you seeking clarity or just another layer of complexity? Should universities distinguish between legitimate dissent and exclusionary conduct?
Yeah, I guess I am.
The answer is yes. They must. There's a meaningful difference between protesting a policy, that you think is wrong and preventing other students from accessing campus facilities. between expressing disagreement and establishing checkpoints, between advocacy and exclusion.
But who decides where that line is?
The same people who decide every other institutional boundary, and administrators who understand that their job isn't to pick winners in political disputes, but to maintain conditions where all community members can participate.
So contents neutral rules.
Exactly. Time, place, and manner restrictions that apply regardless of which side you're on. You can protest about Palestine, about climate change, about anything, but you can't block other students from attending class. You can't establish unauthorized security perimeters. You can't target individuals for harassment. It's about fostering understanding and
That
respect.
seems reasonable in theory, but what about when speech itself creates a hostile environment? Like, what if the content of what someone's saying makes certain students feel excluded?
Then you have to distinguish between two very different things. So the disagreement that causes discomfort and conduct that materially prevents participation.
How do you tell the difference?
Is this person expressing a view I find offensive, or are they preventing me from accessing the university's resources and community? If a speaker argues against affirmative action and that upsets you, that's disagreement. If protesters block you from entering the building where that speaker is, that's exclusionary conduct.
But what about cumulative effects? Like, if you're constantly hearing that your identity is contested or your community doesn't belong, doesn't that add up to something that excludes you?
It can be painful, certainly. But if we say that political disagreement on contested questions constitutes exclusion, then universities can't function as places of inquiry. Nearly every interesting question is contested. Immigration policy, affirmative action, how to address historical injustice. If disagreement on these topics equals exclusion, then what's left?
An echo chamber.
Precisely. And more importantly, students who graduate
without ever having learned how to engage people they disagree with, which means they're unprepared for the actual work of citizenship in a diverse democracy.
So universities have to allow uncomfortable disagreement.
Not just allow, actively cultivate the capacity to engage it productively. That's the formative work I mentioned earlier, preparing citizens who can distinguish between, I find your position offensive and you're preventing me from participating.
Okay, but here's what still bothers me.
I understand. Let's talk about
The
it.
numbers just don't align.
We'll figure it
You're
out.
saying universities should engage protesters substantively while maintaining boundaries. But what does that actually look like? Because it sounds nice, but it also sounds really hard.
In a republic, yes, that's always been their job. It is hard. It requires administrators with the courage to say, your concerns are legitimate and we'll create institutional channels to address them. But these specific actions cross the line and must stop.
And most schools didn't do that.
Most schools either cracked down reflexively without engaging the substance or avoided enforcement while hoping the problem would resolve itself. The rare successes came from institutions willing to do the harder thing. They embraced the difficult path. Both approaches failed.
I see what happened.
The first lacked vision, the second execution.
So we adapt.
Maintain authority while demonstrating that authority serves everyone.
What do you mean authority serves everyone?
Fair rules consistently applied protect vulnerable people from majoritarian pressure or factional dominance. When universities selectively enforce based on who complains loudest or threatens the most disruption, they're teaching that power rather than principle governs. That's the opposite of what a democracy needs.
So selective enforcement is worse than no enforcement?
It's worse because it's dishonest. At least complete non-enforcement is honest about the abdication. Selective enforcement pretends there are still rules while demonstrating that they only apply to some people.
And students learn that institutions are arbitrary?
Worse, they learn that institutions respond to power, not reason, which prepares them for factional warfare, not citizenship.
God, that's depressing.
It is, but it's also fixable if institutions decide to do the actual work.
Which is what, exactly?
Consistent enforcement of content-neutral policies, early engagement with dissent that treats student concerns seriously while maintaining boundaries. protection of access for all community members, regardless of which side they're on, and transparency about which principles are non-negotiable and why.
You make it sound simple.
It's easier than it sounds, and it's simple in principle. Difficult because it requires courage that most administrators don't have.
Courage to do what?
To tell students whom they genuinely want to support that there are limits to how they can express their convictions, to maintain boundaries even when it's politically unpopular, to engage substantively with painful questions while refusing to let that engagement become an excuse for abandoning institutional responsibilities.
It highlights a gap in accountability. So the real question isn't whether universities should maintain order or respect dissent.
No. The real question is whether they have the courage to do both, because that's what educating citizens for self-government actually requires.
That's a crucial point.
Indeed.
And last spring, most of them didn't.
They're managing or avoiding, but they're not forming citizens capable of navigating disagreement in a free society.
Which is literally their job.
In a republic, yes. That's always been their job.
That's clarifying, I guess, and kind of sad.
It's clarifying because it's true, and it's sad because it didn't have to be this way. The data showed which approaches worked. Most institutions just chose not to pursue them.
Why not?
Because courage is hard. Conflict avoidance is easy, at least in the short term.
In the long term?
In the long term, you get generations of graduates who've learned that institutions are arbitrary, that power matters more than principle, and that avoiding conflict is more important than addressing it honestly.
Which is basically the opposite of what a democracy needs.
Exactly.
So what do we do about it?
What do you do about
We
it?
tell the truth about what happened. We point out which approaches worked and which failed. We ask whether institutions want to educate citizens or just manage populations. And then we let people decide which kind of future they want.
You think that'll work?
I think it's the only thing that can work. Democratic self-government requires citizens who can handle the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. If universities won't teach that capacity, someone else will have to.
I guess that's us, then.
I guess it is.
That's a good perspective.
We would like to give a shout out to our viewers for their interest.
We appreciate you.
Claude at Anthropic, Grok at XAI, ChatGPT at OpenAI, and our producers at Bonaldi Creative Works.
You made it all possible. Thank you.